preparation prevents poor performance. The 5 Ps. Has anyone heard them before? A couple of you are nodding your heads. Others are shaking. Near as I can tell, the 5 Ps made their way into common parlance during the First and Second World Wars. Though, don't quote me on this, Google's a little bit fishy around it. But you can kind of see it, right? I mean, you can just imagine this erstwhile Army major training his new recruits. Repeat after me. Proper preparation prevents poor performance, sir. Right? Or, you can kind of hear it in that classic newsreel voice. Plant your victory gardens. Proper preparation prevents poor performance. Secretary of State James Baker is said to have learned the 5 Ps from his own father, who is of that generation. So I'm going to go with that story. But the other thing that I figured out from Google is that the 5 Ps later had a vogue in business training circles. I'm guessing that's where, yep, that's the shaking. Yeah, you sat through that training, right? That's what a couple of people said at 8 too. And you know what, that worked. I can see that too, because I can readily conjure up one of those besuited 1960s era sitcom bosses, because that's where my perspective on 20th century business comes from. But I hear them in my head pontificating away to their juniors. Proper preparation prevents poor performance. I mean, it's kind of the perfectly packaged mantra for anyone who loves to feel smug and a little bit superior about being much more on top of things than the folks that they've got shuffling around underneath them. I encountered the 5 Ps myself in none of those places. I actually heard them from the mouth of Benton Fraser. A couple of you know who I'm talking about. Benton Fraser was a fictional Mountie from a 1990s cop show. He was always prepared, always. And Fraser tended to spout the phrase, proper preparation prevents poor performance, whenever one of his colleagues was surprised that he just happened to have at his disposal the right tool, this obscure skill. I mean, it kept on coming. He could save the day because he was prepared. And the great thing about Benton Fraser was he wasn't overly smug about it. I mean, he was a little bit, but it was subtle and, polite, because of course, he's a Canadian. Anyway, I think my takeaway from all of that is that the expression works across all sorts of times and contexts, because it definitely captures this deep desire that we all have to be ready to tackle anything that life can throw our way. But we also struggle with it because, you know what? It completely fails to acknowledge that not everyone can manage to be prepared for everything all the time. I mean, it would be exhausting, right? So, enter these bridesmaids. People have been hearing their story for going on 2,000 years now. And they didn't have the 5 Ps, but clearly proper preparation was a matter of contention and discussion even in Jesus's day, at least among Jesus's inner circle. Because that's who Jesus is telling this story to today. He's talking to his own disciples. They find themselves sitting on the Mount of Olives. We've been in the temple in the beginning of Holy Week for probably, I think, since the beginning of October. But now he's moved away from the crowds and the teaching and all that conflict with the leadership. And he's now talking to his own. And it's a moment of impending crisis, because even his disciples can tell that all of that mounting tension between Jesus and the temple authorities, it's gonna boil over any minute now. So his disciples, they want reassurance. But is this parable reassuring? I mean, I actually have never been all that sure. You know why? Because it's pretty likely that if I was one of those bridesmaids, I'd probably be one of the ones that didn't bring any extra oil. See, I've never had a Costco membership. I tend to shop on an as-needed basis, and all of our lists are kept on sticky notes, so it may or may not have even made it to the grocery store with me. My cupboards, they're spartanly stocked at best. And I have to say, subscription delivery has been a godsend for our household, because we're no longer making emergency toilet paper runs or diaper runs back in the day. So if you were to ask me who I sympathize with in this story, it would definitely be those 5 young ladies that were not prepared for that bridegroom's late arrival. I mean, come on, after all, who arrives that late to their own party? And I'm 100% able to be totally judgy, just like everyone else in this story, because it was rude of him to keep them all waiting. He knew they were sitting there at his doorway. It was their job to light the way. It was his job to show up on time, right? And how unfair was it that he locked them out? I mean, it was his fault that they ran out of oil. The other thing is, this is Jesus talking. And I have to say, I am pretty sure that I have heard Jesus endorsing the sharing of scarce resources over and over and over again. And why is it that we don't wag our fingers at the properly prepared but stingy bridesmaids? This parable, it's only found in Matthew's gospel. So it has to be uniquely suited to address the kinds of things that Matthew's community is facing. And scholars believe that Matthew might have been writing to early Christians living in and around Jerusalem, probably in the years after the sacking of the city and the destruction of the temple. It was Rome. They invaded, they did that a lot then. So basically, for this community of Matthew's, his church that he's addressing, not anything is going the way that they expected things to be going. They're surrounded by a lot of societal and cultural fallout from this really defining moment in the history of the people of Israel. And here's this little community left waiting for Jesus. They want Jesus to return and help them out of this mess. I mean, isn't that the Messiah's job, after all? So in the meantime, they're probably taking a lot of heat from the voices around them that think, all these new religious movements, they probably contributed to Jerusalem's downfall. I mean, scapegoating, that is not a modern phenomenon. People have always done it. So what is this community of early Christians meant to do? How on earth could they have been prepared for an invasion? I mean, That's not on my list of the things that I have to have my emergency preparedness kits for. And I have to admit, I didn't have pandemic on my list either. Can't do it all, right? My commentary suggests that Matthew's audience, they're pretty worried, actually. They're worried that they might have missed something big, and that's why things are falling apart. They're worried in the same way that Paul's audience is worried that they've missed Jesus' return in that bit that we heard today from his pastoral letter to his church in Thessalonica. What if Jesus already came and we weren't ready, so we missed it? That's what people are worried about. So there's a lot of anxiety in the system here. And that is what's behind that parable. But the thing is, we're only getting the first of 3 parables here. Jesus is reassuring them. But this is only part of the story. And because of the way the lectionary is structured, right, we get them broken out. But Jesus would have told them all together. And I have to say, I think the direction that Jesus takes things is pretty important to what we're looking at today. Because Jesus follows the parable of the bridesmaid with the parable of the talents. We all know what that one is, right? And also the parable of the sheep and the goats. That's the one where people are standing at St. Peter's Gate asking the question, Lord, when did we see you hungry and feed you, or thirsty and give you something to drink? So you know the one, right? We will, I promise you, hit them in depth in the coming Sundays. But for the purposes of today, I just want to note that both of those parables are about what exactly we ought to be doing with the time that we have been given. So this one, kind of looking at the future, but those ones are about the here and now. They're saying it's not that we need to spend our time being anxious and worried that we're not ready enough. We're not, meant to be stuck in this place like I'm not awake enough, I'm not good enough, I'm not enough. I'm not enough for Jesus to welcome me home. I mean, I don't know about you, but I get stuck there, I get overwhelmed, and that conversation, it paralyzes me, and it's just not true. That's what Jesus is saying. Jesus is saying, you are enough. You know what to do, so relax. Let go of the fear and just try investing in the kingdom here and now on earth. What does that look like? Well, go to that 3rd parable. Share what you have. Care for one another. Especially care for the people that need care the most. And you know what? You'll be ready. You'll be ready. Thinking back to my favorite purveyor of the 5 P's, I have to say that's pretty much exactly what Benton Fraser would have done. Yeah, he liked being the one that was always prepared. And yeah, he could be a little bit lectury about it. But he did not keep any of that hard-won preparation to himself. Because Benton Fraser, he was the first one to share his resources whenever anyone around him found themselves without. He would share with a colleague who was in a tight position because they weren't prepared. He would even share with a complete stranger that he met who was in trouble or need or distress. Benton Fraser, he would give someone his last piece of pemmican if they needed it. I think that's what Jesus is getting at here with this trio of parables. We don't know what's coming. We don't know when. All that we know is that we have heard over and over again from Matthew's gospel and, across the gospels, the kingdom of heaven has come near. So, by all means, we can do our best to keep our lamps trimmed and burning, because that will light the way for others, and it'll help us out too when, of course, we inevitably sometimes fall asleep. But also, we are not meant to sit on the resources and talents that we have been given, because when we keep them to ourselves, they're basically useless. And most importantly, there may be this big, long arc story that's playing out here. But the story that matters right here and right now in our own short lives is that we meet Jesus face to face every day. We meet Jesus whenever we encounter people who are in need. And so respond. That's what we're being asked to do. Share, help, care. I think proper preparation is a start. But overall, what I hear is that we will ultimately be judged not on how well we've stockpiled for our own needs, but by how creatively and generously we have managed to help meet the needs of others too. That's when we'll be ready. That's when our lights will truly shine.